God, we need you during this moment. We need to hear from you, God. We need to be reassured by you, God. We need to be encouraged by you, oh God. So, God, have your way in this preaching moment. And now may the words of my heart and the meditation of my spirit, God, be acceptable unto thee. For, Lord, you are my strength and my Redeemer. And it's in the name of Jesus Christ we pray. Amen. What a week, what a week, what a week. It has been a week like none other that I have ever experienced in my lifetime, and I am sure that many of you would say the same thing. Last week, we left our worship experience daring to have hope, and rightfully so. And we are still daring to have hope. But what a difference 7 days can make. Social distancing has become a way of life. We have gone from recommendations that we gather in groups of 250 or less to groups of 50 or less to now groups of 10 or less. We are worshiping by live stream and having to have checkup meeting and Bible study and Sunday school and ministry meetings by conference call. Schools are closed. Colleges have shut down, many for the rest of the academic year. Most of us are teleworking, and some of us are praying that we will continue to have a job in the days and weeks to come as industries shed jobs, especially those who work in hospitality, in travel, and the food industries. We've even had to close down the church building. Food has become scarce. Not just toilet paper, but masks and sanitizer and ventilators. They've all become scarce. And dare we forget that people are dying all around the world. For many of us, this feels like we are living in the darkest valley. And we've only been in the dark place for 1 week. Truth be told, we may have just begun to enter into the darkest valley. There may be even darker days ahead. And so this morning, let us consider the sermon topic, the darkest valley. In May 2001, Lynn Anderson wrote what he called the 23rd Unsong. He said, if someone were to convince him that there is no Father in heaven and no Jesus, that Jesus did not die for him on the cross, that he thinks he would lose his mind. He might even lose his life, and he's sure that he would have lost his soul. And so he penned what he called the 23rd Unsong. It goes like this. I am a sheep without a shepherd. I do not know whom to follow, and I am utterly in want. I am empty. Nothing satisfies. Nothing refreshes me. I find no real fulfillment, no lasting security, no real rest. I feel like a lost soul, totally, irretrievably depleted. I don't believe anyone walks with me in the darkest valley. And contemplation of my own mortality holds me all my lifetime in a bondage of fear and death. For in that final hour, I will be profoundly alone. I feel misguided and I find no authentic comfort in anything, none whatsoever. I feel unwelcome in my world, always hungry for something and totally overwhelmed by 1,000 threatening forces. My blistered head aches with no oil of relief. My cup of joy is dry all the way to the bottom, bone dry. I have given up hoping for any real quality to my life. In fact, genuine goodness and mercy have eluded me all the days of my life, and I don't really expect things to change. Oh, how I ache to belong somewhere, but I really don't feel at home anywhere. And I think I will feel lonely and homeless forever. But thanks be to God that Lynn Anderson's 23rd Unsong is not our reality. While we are in the midst of this darkest valley experience, I would imagine that many of us have uttered the words of the 23rd Psalm that provide comfort to us. Hear our version of the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the right of paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. The 23rd Psalm is most associated with funerals. The reason we so often use this psalm during funerals is because it provides comfort to families and persons who are going through their darkest hours of grief. And this psalm makes some promises about the relationship between the shepherd and the sheep. Promises that we project on ourselves, promises that we need to hear from God to remind us that we can get through dark times. And so this morning, we've not gathered for a funeral, not even a funeral for our present situation or a funeral for the world, but we've come to be encouraged by the hope that can be found in Psalm 23, even though we are in the midst of the darkest hour. Psalm 23 is characterized as a psalm of trust. In fact, it is considered to be a psalm that affirms that God will deliver God's sheep from whatever it is that we as God's sheep may be facing, even a worldwide pandemic known as the coronavirus. We may be locked in our homes today, but Psalm 23 says that we can trust that God can and will deliver us. We may be unable to worship in the church building today, but Psalm 23 says that we can trust that God can and will deliver us. We may be unable to go into work for a while, but Psalm 23 says that God can and will deliver us. We may be faced with the very threat of sickness or the reality of sickness in our bodies, but Psalm 23 says that we can trust in God and he will deliver us. Yes, even though we're going through the darkest valley, Psalm 23 says that God is the one that we can trust in and that he will deliver us. Psalm 23 is attributed to King David. Remember that early in his life, before he became king, David was a shepherd boy. David understood the relationship between the shepherd and his sheep. It was a relationship of trust. In his book, They Smell Like Sheep, Lynn Anderson relays this story. Several years ago in Palestine, Anderson rode a tour bus through Israel's countryside, nearly mesmerized as the tour guide began to explain the scenery and the history and lifestyle of the area. In his description, the tour guide included a heartwarming story about the ancient relationship between the shepherd and the sheep. He expounded how the shepherd builds a relationship with his sheep, how he feeds them and gently cares for them. And he pointed out that the shepherd doesn't drive the sheep, but he leads them. And that the shepherd does not need to be harsh with the sheep because the sheep hear his voice and they follow him. But the tour guide went on to explain how on one of his tours, his story of the sheep and the shepherd backfired. He was giving the story and painting the picture when all of a sudden that everyone on the tour bus had lost their attention to what he was saying. They were all staring out the bus window, and what they were staring at was there was a guy who was running around chasing a herd of sheep. A man was throwing rocks at the sheep and whacking them with his stick and trying to sick a sheepdog on them. The sheep-driving man in the field had totally destroyed the image that the tour guide had tried to give about the relationship between the shepherd and the sheep. And so the tour guide jumped off the bus and he began to say, "Look, you have messed up my story. Why are you mistreating and hazing and assaulting these sheep? What in the world is going on here?" For a moment, bewildered, the man looked at him and said, "I'm not a shepherd. I'm a butcher. Our God is a shepherd and not a butcher. Our God is not one that's trying to catch us and to harm us and to throw things at us and to make us act a certain way. But our God is a loving shepherd who's in relationship with us, who wants to lead us to good things, who wants to lead us to good outcomes, even when we are going through the darkest valley. In this relationship of trust between God, our shepherd, and we, the people, God's sheep. Psalm 23 begins by reminding us that the Lord is my shepherd. David does not say that the Lord is your shepherd or his shepherd or your neighbor's shepherd or her shepherd. David says that the Lord is my shepherd. And so the first point that I want to leave with everyone today is that as we go through the darkest valley, this relationship of trust is between us and God, and it's personal. We may have been in the house all week long alone. We may feel like going through a dark time all alone. But be reminded that even though we may not have the physical presence of others, that the shepherd is with us, that God is with us. There is a gospel song that reached its peak a few months ago entitled, He Knows My Name. This relationship of trust between the shepherd and the sheep is so personal that he knows your name, and he knows my name, and he knows everyone's name. I'm not about to date myself, but I am old enough to remember a TV show that used to come on in reruns when I was a kid called Romper Room. At the end of the show, the hostess, Miss Jean, would hold up a so-called magic mirror. It had no glass in it. It was open and empty. It just had a frame. And she would look into the camera and speak directly to the children in television land and say, Romper, Stomper, Bumper, Boo. And she would begin to call out the names of children that she saw in TV land, and she would call them personally by their names. Well, our shepherd does not have a magic mirror because our shepherd does not need magic. But our shepherd is a God who's able to look into our situations, even when we're locked in our all by ourselves, even when we're in the midst of the darkest valley, and he knows our name, he knows our situation. He's looking at you right now, and he can say, I see you, Marion. I see you, Gloria. I see you, Brianna, and I see you, Cliff. I see you, Gladys, and I see you, Janet. I see you, Donna, and I see you, Stanley. Why? Because we are in a personal relationship with God. And so God sees you even in the midst of your darkest valley, because this is a relationship of trust, and it's personal. But I go even further. I'm not aware of shepherds who lead a flock that only has one sheep. I'm not sure if you can actually even have a flock if it has one sheep. A shepherd may go out and rescue a lone sheep that has gone astray, but generally sheep are a part of a sheep herd, which is where the word shepherd comes from. If there is anyone out there who feels alone, you're not alone. The shepherd is leading you, and there are other sheep in this herd that we call a community of faith. We may not physically be located here together, but we still are a flock. We still are a sheep herd. You may be in your respective homes all the week long, but if we as members would reach out to one another, if we would reach out to those who are on the margins of our communities, if our class leaders would reach out to their members, and if the clergy would call the flock, no one has to feel alone. Each of us can feel like we're not in the darkest valley all alone, but the shepherd is with us, and there are other sheep that are with us. I've been encouraged all week as I called to check on our class leaders that they told me they've been in contact with their members. I've been encouraged by ministry leaders who've reached out to the people on their ministry, like Sister Denise Pincham, who's reached out to the deaconess to make sure that they're all doing okay. And I'm thankful even for members that have reached out to me and said, Pastor, we just want to check and see how you're doing. If we all check up on each other, then we'll be be reminded that even in the darkest valley, we're a part of a flock. We're a part of a sheep herd, and that everything is going to be. And so while we go through this darkest valley, remember that in this relationship of trust, that it is personal. The second point I want to leave with you today is that when we go through the darkest valley, this relationship of trust between the sheep and the shepherd has some promises that go with it. Think for a minute about the relationship between a shepherd and a sheep. Practically speaking, sheep put their trust in the shepherd for a few things. They trust the shepherd for protection. They trust the shepherd for provision. And they trust the shepherd for direction. Because of this relationship of trust in them, just like the butcher that was in the earlier illustration, in 1 Samuel 17, David was facing a giant by the name of Goliath. David shared with Saul that David was serving as a shepherd, that he'd been tending his flock, and that he knew how to deal with lions and bears. Our God is one that knows how to deal with the lions and the bears and even the tigers, oh my, that come our way and attack us and want to be predators. We have the promise that our shepherd, our good shepherd, that he will protect us when predators are against us. It doesn't matter if the predator is a pandemic. It doesn't matter if the predator is illness. It doesn't matter if the predator is a person. We have a God who is our shepherd, and he will come after us. And even if the predator has us in its very mouth, just like David said, as the shepherd, he was able to reach and pull the one who's under attack out of the predator. So Psalm 23 says in verse 4, even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and they comfort me. I don't know about you, but the mental picture of the Lord protecting me, having my back, fighting those who would attack me, gives me a sense of comfort even in the trying times. We need not fear, but rather let's operate in faith that God is protecting us even when we are going through the dark valley. He not only protects us, but he also provides for us. God promises us in Psalm 23 that he will make provisions for us. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. When I hear that God lets his sheep rest in green pastures, I get excited. Green pastures are healthy. Green pastures are nourishing. Green pastures are comforting, as opposed to pastures that are unhealthy and unable to produce nourishment and unable to be a place where comfort can be found. The store shelves may be empty, but we won't find ourselves in a food desert. No, we'll find ourselves in green pastures. Others may be lacking spiritual food, but we will be fed by the rich spiritual food by our God. Those who aren't in relationship with God may be in distress in times like these. We will be able to look around our environment and see God moving in our situation and working things out for us. But this is not all that God provides. In Psalm 23, verse 5, it goes on to say that God prepares a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil, and my cup overflows with blessings. It's one thing to be promised God will prepare a feast, and it's another thing for God to say that he'll prepare the feast in the very presence of our enemies. When I think about a feast being prepared, I kind of get excited, especially while I'm still in the midst of this fasting that's going on. When I think about a feast, I think about all my favorite foods. My feast would start with some fluffy scrambled eggs and some corned beef hash, some fried potatoes and some English muffins, and I'd wash it all down with some cran grape juice. But then my feast would slide on lunch, and I'd find that perfectly prepared steak and cheese and those crispy fries and a Diet Coke to wash it all down. At some point, my feast would go on, and it'd be dinner time. I'd have some crab cakes and a baked potato, a nice garden salad and some sweet tea. I'd cap off my feast with some rich, delicious chocolate cake. But then we're promised that I don't just get to in the presence of my enemies. A pandemic is going on in my face, but I'm unfazed because I'm feasting off those fluffy eggs. Sickness is coming my way, but I'm unfazed because I'm feasting on that steak and cheese. Financial troubles are coming my way, but I'm unfazed because I'm feasting on my crab cakes right now. All my enemies can do is sit and watch me feast all day long while God is holding back, and I'm feasting, and they're wondering why they can't get to me. And if that's not enough, Psalm 23 says that while I'm sitting around getting fat, feasting all day, that he has provided oil for me, and it will drip down my head. And so instead of me being ashy, I'm oily, because the anointing of God is over me and my household, and stuff just keeps slipping off of me because I'm oily. I'm so blessed by God that my cup is overflowing with blessings. It's so much coming my way that my saucer can't even hold what's falling out of my cup. Anybody in the midst of a pandemic feel blessed right now? Anybody in the midst of sickness feel blessed right now? Anybody in the midst of a financial challenge, do you feel blessed right now? Even when we go through the darkest valley, he has said that he will make provisions for us. But not only will he protect us and provide, he says that he will give us direction. Verse 2 says that we have the opportunity to sit by streams. Have you ever sat by a cascading river that's trickling water and it's gurgling? It's really therapeutic and it's really peaceful. Imagine sitting by a peaceful stream while all hell is breaking out around us. That is what God is promising us. God promises us peace if we would just listen for his peaceful sounds and his spiritual streams that are flowing through our life. There is no need for us to panic. There's no need to fear too long. There's no need for us to freak out. But what we're called to do is listen to the shepherd and let him lead us along peaceful pastures. Let him lead us along green meadows and experience the peaceful streams that will renew us. That is not the only direction we're promised. In verse 3, he says that he guides us along the right paths of honor for his name. The key to this promise is that we have to let God lead us. Sometimes we get in God's way, and God's trying to lead us. One thing about being in a dark place, you can't lead yourself out of darkness when you don't know where you're going. And our God has promised us that he is the light. So let him walk in front of us. Let him be the light that leads us in a way that we find ourselves coming out of this pandemic, even though we may be in the darkest valley. The final point that I want to leave with you is that this relationship is powerful. This relationship has promises that go with it. But the third thing is that in this relationship of trust, it is perpetual. Perpetual means that it lasts forever. Psalm 23 verse 6 says, "Surely goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever." Church, we ought to be able to shout right there. All the days of our lives, even in the midst of a dark valley, God is pursuing us. God's goodness is trying to chase us down. God's unfailing love, God's steadfast love, God's reckless love is stalking me all the days of my life. The chorus of the gospel song, "Reckless Love," puts it this way. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the other 9 to go find that sheep. I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Even in the darkest valley, the reckless love of God is pursuing me, trying to chase me down. It's fighting to me until it finds me. I will leave the flock and come find you if you get separated from me. If you find yourself in a place all by yourself, I'm not going to let you stay there. I'm coming after you, because we've got a perpetual relationship that nothing can come between. You can't earn it. You don't deserve it. But God's love is so great that he gives it to us. This God's goal is for me to live in the house of the Lord forever. And when we find ourselves in that perpetual presence of the Lord forever and ever, there won't be any more darkness there. There will be no more valleys there. When we are perpetually with God, there is only light there because God is light. And so we might be experiencing the darkest valley right now, but trouble won't last always. As our foreparents used to say, soon we'll be done with the troubles of this world, going home to live with God. No more weeping and a wailing. No more weeping and a wailing. No more weeping and a wailing. I'm going home to live with God. This is a relationship that is perpetual. I will live in the house of the Lord forever. And we've got to believe that wherever God is, we're in the household of God. My brothers and sisters, we may be going through the darkest valley, but God, our shepherd, says to each of us that we, his sheep, are in a relationship that is a relationship that is personal, a relationship that has promises, and a relationship that is perpetual. I don't know about you, but that leaves me in a good place to know that I will make it through, even though we are in the midst of the darkest valley, that God is with me. Emmanuel is with me, even when we go through the darkest valley. Amen.
Amen.
Right where you are, we would ask that you would join us in a moment of prayer. God, we thank you for this moment to be reminded by you that even though it feels like we're in the darkest valley, we're not in this thing alone. And so God, not just by technology, but by the move of your Spirit, go and touch someone who needs to be reminded that they are going to come out of this thing, that trouble don't last always, and that you're with us in the midst of this time. Go into our minds and let light come. Go into our spirits and let light reign. Go into our homes and let light reign. Go into our world and let light reign. Go everywhere, God, and let your light have its way, even in this darkest valley that we find ourselves in. And it's in the name of Jesus, who is the Christ, we pray. Let everyone say,